Hello, everyone. Today I am thrilled to introduce Jeanine Souren and Hans van Wechem. Jeanine is a clinical psychologist and sexologist who specializes in psychedelic work with couples. She runs a private practice in the Netherlands where she works with clients from all over the world, offering psychedelic-assisted and non-psychedelic sessions for couples and individuals. Jeanine has dedicated her career to help repair, heal, and strengthen relational brokenness and sexual challenges for couples and individuals. Notable for our House of Peregrine community is she also spent 22 years living abroad throughout Asia before returning to Amsterdam. She is well versed in international life, both the gifts and the challenges. She has also experienced coming back home and being forever a peregrine, an outsider. Hans has over 30 years of experience in the psychiatric field and has been working as a psychiatrist in his own private practice since 2003. His line of expertise lies in working with people who suffer from early childhood trauma and attachment disorders. He has a profound knowledge in non-ordinary states of consciousness. He is a certified bonding psychotherapist and teaching fellow, as well as a systemic psychotherapist. Jeanine and Hans met when they worked together for Fieldtrip Health in Amsterdam, where Hans served as medical director and Jeanine the head of therapy. At Fieldtrip, hundreds of clients were safely guided during their magic truffle sessions with a proven track record for leading safe and legal psychedelic sessions for many individuals from all over the world. When it shut its doors due to the pandemic, Jeanine and Hans knew they wanted to continue with the knowledge they gained, and with their combined approach in 2022, Jeanine and Hans founded the Experiential Training Institute as a hands-on teaching environment dedicated to training mental health providers in psychedelic processes. This is where I met them. I knew that I had gone through some major shifts after living abroad for 7 years personally, professionally, and in my relationship with the love of my life after 20 years together. The normal means of couples counseling didn't seem to be the right tool for what I wanted to experience and create looking to the future. I really wanted to deepen my understanding of myself and my partner and how we were co-creating our life together. This did not really fit into the traditional couples therapy model. When I heard of an acquaintance in LinkedIn that had gone through a couples session with psilocybin, I reached out to Jeanine initially for an interview for this podcast and left instead with a no to the podcast and a yes for myself to working together with Jeanine and Hans with the goal of employing psychedelics as a modality to deepen and grow in the new ways for which I will be forever grateful. After going through the couples process, which included individual and combined journeys, I asked again if we could do the interview, and to my delight, this time they said yes. After checking in and discussing with Doug, my partner, he enthusiastically agreed to allow me to open up and tell our story. I am so honored and excited to have them on and share their work with you, as for me it has been profound and life-altering to work with their method. Both Jeanine and Hans understand firsthand the non-ordinary state of consciousness and its opportunities, as well as the unique challenges that come with altered states. Understanding the science, history, philosophy, psychology, and psychiatry, as well as the sacred wisdom linked with psychedelic work, has taken years. Being in the Netherlands, one of the countries of the world that some psychedelics are legal and can be used therapeutically, is an important part of the story. Because of the longevity of this tolerance, the Netherlands is known for its rich wisdom and experience with the use of psychedelics. Jeanine and Hans are on the forefront of what is possible in individual and couples therapy with the assistance of psychedelics, and I am thrilled to be able to share this exciting frontier with you today. Hi, guys.
Hi, thank you for the intro, and sorry that you have to stumble. The words of our company are a little bit complicated.
Don't worry. You know what? There's so many different languages and pronunciations, but we made it through, and I'm thrilled to share everything because I think in this case it matters. And so, how did it feel to have your career kind of laid out like that for you?
Very comfortable, and I was actually a little bit proud of myself, I must say.
Yeah, yeah. I must say I'm proud to bring you on. Hans, do you have anything else to say about that? How did it feel?
Yeah, well, it sort of sums it up. And then I'm looking back, I think, well, it's quite a lot, isn't it? But it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't
Yeah,
make me into another person.
yeah.
So all the
It's
titles,
just your journey.
it's just my journey, and all the titles for me don't mean that much, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. But I think what I have learned through working with you and also through speaking with this a lot is that this unique path has brought you to be able to create in this unique way, which I really think is and know is revolutionary. Um, so I asked people to come on because I truly believe not only couples and individuals go through when they leave their country has a huge influence on their life path. And that combined with work you're doing with couples brings this well into the House of Peregrine umbrella with what we're creating. Um, and so tell me, um, I want to talk to Jeanine just quickly about the experience of moving to a new country and back, and how that changes what you've seen in your clients and yourself, in your sense of self.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I must say, moving abroad has really changed every perspective from the core, and it had also uh, um, changed relationships. So I moved abroad because before I became a psychologist, I was a journalist, and during my travels, I met my then husband, and from a different culture, American. And then we got married, and then everything shifted because of the polarity and diversion of the roles, and that kind of accelerated my own process of who am I, and what is self. That's when I started to become a psychologist, but I didn't get answers to my questions. I only got more questions. So the impact on relationships of moving abroad is huge, I think.
Yeah. I think it really hits on the sense of belonging, and what it means. Like I always say, the cult and cultures. You start to notice that you have a culture, and that can really bring up some interesting questions when you're in the container of a relationship, especially. So inevitably, I think in couples work, I've even heard you say in other interviews, couples change at different speeds and are in different places. I think an international move actually puts whatever was happening already, it puts fuel on that fire. Would you say you've seen that?
I have, and I think that's why maintenance of the foundations are even more important when you move overseas and you leave your habitat and you move into another context. It's so easy to build a house of cards instead of a firm building, as is perhaps more logical when you are in your home country. So, looking after your relationship and each other is very important.
Yeah. And the incidence of divorce or breakup in international couples is extremely high. And I suspect that might be part of it. This house of cards you talk about.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I want to back up a little bit and talk about your experience with, first of all, you both did a lot of work as therapists, as professionals before psychedelics came into kind of your professional life, if you will. Can you tell me a little bit about that transition and maybe the moment you realized that this was the future of therapy?
Mhm. You go, Hans.
Well, that came about quite early in my life. I was always a reader, and I stumbled upon this book. Maybe you've heard about it. It's quite an iconic book. It's The Teachings of Don Juan by Carlos Castaneda, and he described an American anthropologist, a student, studying ancient cultures in Mexico. And he came in contact with a shaman that introduced him to peyote. And then he wrote all these books about what he experienced and his transition in becoming, maybe even against his own will, he becoming a sort of shaman. So I was
Mm,
really intrigued about this stuff that could, and he was really rigid in his thinking, and I could recognize myself a bit in this American guy.
mm,
But I was really impressed about the power of psychedelic, what it could do. So I promised myself the first opportunity I would get, I would want to try this for myself. And it took quite a number of years for me to first encounter the power of ayahuasca. That was still legal back then in the Netherlands. Now it's already also prohibited.
oh wow.
And that made me aware of the enormous potential, the life changing potential of psychedelics, but also about the potential dangers. because I didn't experience any preparation or guidance or integration before, during, and after, I was sort of left on my own account, and that was quite a struggle, I can tell you. So that sort of lit the fire in me for wanting to create a safe way of doing this, a professionally guided way that would make a bridge between more ancient shamanistic cultures and the sort of modern Western medical points of view. Because for it to be integrated within a Western society, it has to adapt and fit in our ideas about what healing is. And that's, well, learning to speak different languages. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So that makes the
Do
bridge
you,
between moving to another country as well.
yeah. Do you feel like you became almost a representative for both sides? So the shamanistic point of view and the Western medicine, which you were both kind of, you had one foot in each. And so you were almost creating a new language in a way, or two cultures talking to each other.
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far that I would dare to name myself a shaman, because that in itself is not something that you should easily call yourself, because that's embedded in a tradition over generations, with so and so deeply connected to nature that I can't even start to comprehend what it must feel like to be a true shaman. What I was trying to say is that it should be based on respect, even if we don't understand that language
Mm.
as much. We still need to respect the ancient ways that originated and preceded our Western, somewhat limited ideas about what it factually is. So especially the spiritual connection is something that's been overlooked within Western research. Well, and I think that's crucially important for the change that people are going through. So,
I would,
yeah.
I totally agree. And so, do you remember the first session? So you had your own journey. It sounds, and I know this from knowing you, but also you're telling us you have your own journey. But that moment when you began bringing it into your spiritual inklings here and brought them into your practice, um, tell us what that was like.
Would you like to start, Jeanine, or shall I continue?
Okay, you can continue, and I will interrupt you when you talk too long.
That's a good deal.
True partners, business partners.
A deal. Oh, well, I'm from a Roman Catholic background, so my spiritual context is different from the more tribal communities with the ayahuasca in South America. And those symbols and those um, powerful representations were, I think, on the foundation of my first psychedelic experience with ayahuasca. So the archangels and the demons and all those representatives that I took for real the first time. I
Mm.
was not able to understand fully what they represented on a deeper level. So my first journey with ayahuasca was nothing short of horrendous, terrifying, and at the same time, mm, truly, like I said, life changing, because I experienced maybe for the first time what unconditional love was like, and that really, well, broke it all open and made me question about what it is that we are doing in trying to fix conditional relationships without touching upon the deeper layer, that's more the spiritual layer of unconditional love within conditioned relationships. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that makes total sense. And I think we see it in this. Some people use the words non. Oh, yeah, we see this as the individual needs to be coming together in a conditional relationship with unconditional love for themselves. Is that how you would sum it up? And we are missing that a bit by trying to make a marriage or a relationship unconditional, or it just wasn't fitting
Mhm.
without this base.
Mhm.
Interesting. Okay, Jeanine, I think you have a moment.
So my journey went a little bit different because I've been working as a trauma therapist for so long, doing EMDR, which is a very common scientifically proven method to work with people with trauma. And I thought I was a little bit bored with that intervention, and I thought, well, what else is there? And that's when I came across Bessel van der Kolk, who works very body oriented, and but also the studies about MDMA and what MDMA can do for people that suffer from PTSD. PTSD is post traumatic stress disorder, and that's when I was, I think, 46. And I'd never touched any drugs or that. Didn't even smoke a joint. Was super Sunday good girl. And then I said to my partner, I said, I want to experience this because I want to understand what happens in your brain. And then he said, okay, I will do this too. And I said, well, I don't think so because I've been reading about this for a year. But anyway, in the end, we both did it. And it was unbelievable what happened in the brain. And thus for our relationships, because we are both, this is our second relationship, and we have obvious obstacles that come with blended families and loyalties. And we were able in that one session that lasted 4 hours to talk through the most difficult issues that had been on our relational path without guilt or shame. And I thought, wow, not only is this good for PTSD, but it also is in a relational way amazing because the fear receptors in your brain are temporarily not activated, which makes it so much easier and calm to walk through and talk through issues. So that was my beginning of the psychedelic space, because in the Netherlands we're not yet allowed to work with MDMA, but we are allowed to work with psilocybin, and that's how Hans and me met at Fieldtrip Health, where we were doing psilocybin therapies, or truffles in the Netherlands.
Yeah. So when you were doing that work, I did some research, and you were in the beginning, kind of when it closed, this research about using it not just with people, individuals with PTSD, and bringing their family along, but
Mm.
also actually bringing it into the process of couples therapy, which
Yeah,
is what you've now developed out now.
yeah.
So tell me about what you were seeing back then, the aha moments that you were having, because
Yeah.
you were able to have a bit more freedom, and your collaboration and your expertise coming together made for this moment where you could actually develop this process. So tell me a
Sure.
little bit about that.
Yeah, well, coincidentally, both me and Hans are licensed couples therapists. We didn't know that before, but we are. And we found out that everyone who has a psychedelic journey, it really, when you peel it all off, it's like what Hans says, it comes down to love and relational items. So ultimately, everyone who comes out of a journey, the topic is relationships and the sense of belonging. And so we thought it was an easy bridge to make to couples who don't feel connected anymore, or not as deeply as they would like to, or who are struggling with sexuality issues, or who are struggling with differences in desires. And when people journey together, it's very special. It's very sacred and very special. And there is a lot of openness that we have witnessed when people come out of a journey. And that's also a very interesting time to bring up items that may have seemed really big on the table of arguments and are so small and seen from a different perspective when you have done a psychedelic journey.
Yeah.
Can you relate to this yourself?
Yeah, so I think this is a good time. So my experience was very much coming, um, you know, we have been together for 20 years, and I think in that it's a psychedelic journey in itself to be in a long-term relationship. Um, but what I was finding was we would go to the only thing to do is to talk to someone who's an expert in relationships, but that's not really done unless you're struggling in certain ways, or it just we just weren't fitting the mold of a couple who's normally in couples therapy. So the therapist didn't know what to do with us, really. They're like, but you guys seem fine. And we're like, we are fine. We want to go deeper. We want to be intentional. We want to grow a lot more. We don't see our 40s the same way our parents did. And so that we did for a couple of years, and that actually became more destructive than it was productive, because I think of how we're relating to each other, and you know, for a lot of reasons probably. So when I heard about this notion, and we did an intake with you guys, it was kind of at a time when I feel like we were pretty a little bit hopeless about our possibilities for what we could do in deepening our relationship, because all of the professionals were kind of like, you guys are fine, and again, fine is not what we were after. so so that was a really interesting moment. And then kind of I it's always been my belief that, and I've been on my own journey with plants, not necessarily psychedelics, but that they usually come into your life for a reason. And so when I spoke with Jeanine initially about the podcast interview, I thought, no, psychedelics aren't for me. But then after speaking, I was like, oh, this might be actually what I've been looking for.
Mhm.
And so that, and Doug had also been on his own journey and wanted to involve psychedelics.
Mhm.
So when we came to you guys, that was it. And then we kind of got into this, and I should say we're still kind of in the process, but it's where we were kind of in your very capable hands, right? We're like, okay, this is what we want. These are our inevitable, after 20 years, big items that we really want to clear out, or at least work with differently. And it started from there. And so that involved for us, and I think this is pretty common with you guys, this is kind of what you've developed, is an individual journey for each of us, and then a combined psychedelic journey together. um,
Yeah.
and that was really eye-opening for both of us to do that, have that experience.
Mhm.
But when you gave us the notion, and I know this spoke very much to Doug, with your mind like one of those stretchy balls where it
Yeah.
has a lot of space all of a sudden. That gives you space to go around these problems in a different way.
Yeah.
But also, in any relationship, no matter how good, you do have traumas with each other that probably stem from way back when, but you don't know how to get around them. And so it's been my experience that what Jeanine says is really, really true. Um, but
Yeah.
it's very
But
hard to explain. Yeah, that ball. Yep.
for those of you who are watching, this is how we describe as rigid thinking patterns. So it's quite stuck together, and this is how we get from A to B, and this is how we like to think. And the older we get, the more comfortable it becomes to think the same way. But if you use plant medicine like psilocybin, this kind of happens. So you expand the same thinking, and which makes your psychological flexibility increase, and it kind of looks like this. And so that's what I like to explain when people are asking what happens in the brain, and then with the neuroplasticity too, which is a difficult word for learning how to think in new ways. And the
Yeah.
psilocybin kind of helps with that.
And it helps, I think, specifically within relationships, to imagine new outcomes, or imagine that something can be overcome that maybe you've just let go and it's affecting you still. And so back to what Hans said, what was really lovely was the individual journeys allowed us to grow or find things about ourselves, without it just getting caught in the relationship, if that makes sense. Because I mean, this is how I've heard it works. When you're in a romantic relationship, especially for a long time, you trigger each other. And after you've triggered each other so many times, it just becomes a habit. And so then it doesn't have progress. This allowed us to bring some things up and then deal with them individually, and then come together and have a new set of horizons for how to deal with those things. Um, and like you said, it's a very, I would say, I think most people rate it as like one of the most profound experiences of their lives, along with like having children and getting married or any other big transformational experience in your life. And that's how I would also describe it.
Mm.
Um, so what I want to thanks for listening. I know you guys know, but I think what I want to start back with is, how do you find, is this for everybody? I think when you first come out of this therapy, you think everybody should do this.
Mm.
But after some reflection, tell me, in your experience, is this literally for everyone?
You go, Hans.
No, it isn't for everyone. Definitely not. And well, with the screening procedure, we always use the official in and exclusion criteria based on the scientific research. And of course, it's a zero risk tolerance, especially with the research after something that's still so controversial as psychedelics are. So there is no, there is this, well, really strict approach to people that are at risk. And well, you can imagine if you have been through psychotic episodes in your life, or are directly related to someone who is psychotic or has been psychotic, then not only statistically, when you do have had your own psychedelic or few psychotic episodes, then I think it's clear that you shouldn't take any risk when you find it difficult enough to relate to reality that we as people agreed upon. Well,
Yeah,
that's another philosophical topic, of
it
course.
is. We'll have you back for a whole topic on that.
Yeah. So for people that have been psychotic or are directly related, and the second um, part of it is that it's only a statistical risk, because people maybe never ever would experience a psychotic episode themselves, but simply being related elevates the chance to, I think, 15% that they might become psychotic. And that sometimes is difficult because people can be highly motivated and be really suitable in their way, that they are emotionally mature enough to process what might be an overwhelming experience. So, talking to people that are motivated and eager to do it themselves, and being, and I have to decline them because of this statistical risk, is sometimes difficult. Um, but still, for people that have bipolar conditions, so they can become manic, we know that can be a trigger. The compound itself, psilocybin, can be a trigger in people becoming hypomanic or manic. And any physical condition that can lead to an acute situation, of course, that's not what you want. So people with epilepsy, for instance, no, well, you don't want to go there. So there are quite a number of people that, for those reasons, were being declined, also in Fieldtrip. And we take it a step further because we want to know if people are emotionally mature enough
Yeah,
to be.
describe that for us, because I think it's a difficult
Yeah.
concept.
I think in the preparation that we could go through with people, we use all sorts of techniques. Schema therapy is one of the techniques that we use in internal family systems. And in short, it's about representations of your inner parts. And we all know we have got inner children and inner adolescents, and we can still act or feel like we are way younger than we actually are. Playing with my children when they were small, I could easily connect with the little boy, being really enthusiastic about the toys and the stuff that my son was playing with. So I could relate to my inner child, so to speak. But if you haven't grown into adulthood as a mature person, how can you integrate the stuff that might come up? So you need a stable, um, mature person, at least as a representation within yourself, to be able to benefit from also difficult, traumatic experiences within yourself. Like a child needs a parent to be safe, you need your inner parent to be safe.
Can
Yeah.
And
I
if,
add
yeah,
can I add something to that? So we've also had a father and a daughter several times join one of our ETI programs, and one of the daughters was only, I think she was only 20, and that's quite young. So when we screened her, we really looked at how emotionally mature is she and can she handle landing after a journey and then integrating what she had seen. And she was a very smart, mature young woman. And what it did for the relationship between her and her father was really astounding, because her father was Hans and my age, had never really done any substances before, and he did it to strengthen the relationship with his daughter. And he was willing to put himself out there and take psilocybin with his daughter under our guidance, and it really was wonderful, right, Hans? Even
absolutely.
even though she was super young, so
Yeah,
calendar age doesn't always correspond with emotional maturity. That's what I wanted to say.
yeah.
I'm
So
really
that's
glad I'm really glad I didn't see emotional maturity on the list before I did this, because I would have been intimidated, I think. But I think you guys have, it's not like it's something you check off. It's a feeling or something
Yeah,
in the screening that you
yeah.
guys can get a sense for. And would you say there's like there's a type of person that would go for this, like in a party scene? Like all of these things we're talking about can be seen at a party or a rave or something. So there's that type of user, I guess, or people that seek these substances out.
Recreationally.
Yeah, recreationally. But then, is there, in this setting, is there a type of person that this or not type of person, but even type of relationship with this suits really well? Or what would people, if they really want to see if they're well suited for this, what would you say they would maybe look for?
you go, Jeanine.
Yeah, well, what we find is curious people, people who are used to thinking outside of the box, people who who run into obstacles, who run into repetitive patterns that come on their life path, and very often they have something to do with their personality. And when you go through many therapies, like myself, I've been in therapy for 100 years, it feels like, and that's because we have to, because we are doing this work. And I thought, all right, well, I've lifted every stone, and okay, I need to do this myself because I'm interested in the psychedelic work. And then I realized, oh, there's a big difference between having a talk therapy with an outside therapist and a talk with yourself on the deepest layers, at the deepest level, without feeling criticized. And that's, I believe, one of the strong points of a psychedelic journey, is that you are actually going into a conversation with your inner healing intelligence, which is like our inner compass that we lose track of very often in this fast paced world. But that is often so beautiful and so much more meaningful on even a cellular level than a cognitive conversation.
So it reaches new depths or new areas, because often it is at the it is a you're dancing with your with whoever you're doing therapy with, and they can't always see what you can see, but you also can't see. So having this conversation with yourself allows there to be less noise. Is that
Yeah, yeah, and but it also, I think it also allows deeper levels, much deeper levels than I have ever experienced in my own therapies, and I've been with good therapists.
yeah,
Ultimately, I think the in Dutch we have a saying. It's called eigen wijsheid. It's self wisdom, but in Dutch it's meant a little bit cynical. But I think though that inner wisdom is ultimately the biggest source of knowledge.
yeah,
And I also make the distinction, and Janine heard me saying this before, between what I call the uploading and the downloading.
Mhm.
The uploading is the stuff that comes from your personal background, but also from everything that's embedded within your system on a genetic basis, but also transgenerational unresolved issues that we all inherited, so to speak. Even though you don't want it, it's still there. It's unresolved past trauma. And that's what can come up. That's more the therapeutical part of the session in itself. You have to deal, you have to clean up your own mess, so to speak. That's the uploading. And for lots of people, a psychedelic experience is mostly about uploading. So they can have several sessions and still having to do a lot of work, and it feels like work. It also can feel physically like they have been doing hard labor. And there's also the part what I call downloading. That's where the mystery comes in. That's when people start talking about mystical experiences. This is more tapping into the collective, the the stuff that you can't easily explain. It's difficult to talk about. It's more on a deep spiritual layer of what I refer it as the unconditional love, the awe, the wonder. Um, and when people have experiences like that, they are life changing. It's when people talk about near death experiences and they seen the light, so to speak, and it changes their whole attitude towards what's really important in their lives. This is when I do feel the magic happens, and you can't predict. You can't predict which one will have a mystical experience and for whom it simply be hard labor to clean up the mess.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember, this might be a good time to mention, you guys have worked with a very intentional blend of psilocybin, that is you guys favor it for its ability to work in this way with your own inner wisdom. Is that, I mean, that was, I feel like you guys kind of developed that too. So that's another really special thing about working with you guys.
Yeah, I think the blend you are referring to is that the therapeutic component of
Right. The
uh,
plant,
a j-
whatever. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I think is as important as the actual plant medicine journey. Um, because without the proper context and without the proper tools to navigate the landscapes of a journey, so much can get lost. And so we try to equip every individual with knowledge, more knowledge about their parts, about themselves, and perhaps even what to look for. But there's never a guarantee that that will actually, be the case. And the integration part we think is super important also, because you go into a journey and you pick up pearls. We call them pearls, because you look for oysters and they're hidden in a pearl. and to make meaning to those pearls is also very important, and not just on a knowing level, but also on a somatic level, for example, and on an emotional level, to pay attention to all of these aspects after a journey can sometimes take weeks.
or months or forever.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, I think um, that integration is also something that happens is really nice to do together as a couple,
uh-huh.
and that has also been a new source of um, closeness, right? Like it's like you've learned a new realm and you can share it with each other, a new realm of yourself and a new realm, maybe. I don't like to call it spiritual because that has a weird word for me, but like it's another realm that you've explored and you've both done it.
Yeah,
Um,
and if there's only one in a couple, it's a very different language to explain when you haven't experienced it yourself. So
yep.
Hans and me are lucky. Both our partners are familiar with psychedelic journeys. So it makes it a bit easier to talk about it
Mm.
at home.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so we've delved into the depths because that's how I work and I think you guys work. But I want to do a little bit more to help people kind of envision what this process is like. Um, do you think men and women approach psychedelic therapy differently, or have you seen a difference in the approach or the willingness, if you will?
Can I answer that, Hans? Because, but you can add to it. So I find, because it's such a bold breakthrough approach, that a lot of men are involved or interested, and whereas the emotional volume of I'm generalizing a little bit, but of women is much more developed often, not always, is going to therapy is much more common. But this approach appeals to men because it's really very no nonsense, and it's talking with yourself during a journey. And yes, before and after you'll engage with a therapist, but it has a different feel to it because it's quite daring. It's almost like going paragliding or doing an adventurous sport. What would you say, Hans?
Yeah, and I think you can also look upon it as a initiation ritual sometimes. Mm. Like in ancient cultures, to really become a man, you had to do a sort of test,
Mm.
challenge. Um, and sometimes this feels like the ultimate initiation ritual to dive in, to jump off a cliff with a rope tied to your ankles. That's more the masculine way. It's daring as well, and sometimes mm, unrationalized daring. Like, I'm curious, I've read all the stuff about it, it's scientifically approved. Let's see what this does with my brain.
Yeah.
And the initiation is more of what the adolescents and the youth do, is they sort of dive in head first, not knowing what they are doing, and that's where stuff can go wrong. But that's more of a masculine, egoic thing, proving to yourself, proving to your friends that I do this.
Mm.
And women approach it, in my point, more from another place, not that scientifically oriented, but more from a unfulfilled need, um, and maybe a deeper longing as well. Yeah, how could I say this? More, mm, yeah, more from this point of communication. Like, we have to communicate also with the with the bigger mystery. But it sounds
Yeah.
a bit vague, and it is.
Yeah.
But that's the difference.
And I'm sure you guys are familiar with the work of this author who talked about the world's religions being based on psychedelic um, ceremonies that were largely carried out by women. And so for
Mm,
me, I think that there's a echo there in what you're saying of this lost, maybe lost knowing that's in our bodies, but maybe not
mm,
taught to us, for both men and women, but that were historically largely carried out by women.
mm,
Um, which I read all of this after my journey, and it
mm.
resonated so much with my own experience. Okay, more less deep questions, guys. We can do this. I have my list of questions, but I love going deep with you guys because I think you guys are doing this work in a way that other people aren't. When I research it myself, when I hear other podcasts, you guys are in the depths of the psyche, but also, and I hate to use the word spiritual, but you're accepting of the spiritual in a way that maybe isn't always common. Um, what are common concerns you see from couples when they come into you? I'm sure there's safety, which you guys have addressed already because you are very safe, and you kind of have done it a lot of times. And so you, but what are the maybe emotional or less common things you've heard from couples?
Well, from couples. The, well, but that's not just for couples. People ask about touch, therapeutic touch, or they also ask about sexual feelings arising. How common is it to feel aroused during a session when you basically don't feel like you're in control? Those questions come up a lot, and then we always are able to reassure them that if we just tap on someone's shoulder then and whisper in the ear, that always does the trick. um, what else, Hans?
Yeah, well, I was approaching your question maybe from another standpoint, um, because your question was what. Can you rephrase it again? So I have
Yeah, I mean,
to.
what are common concerns? So I had in mind that they might be afraid of growing apart because of how much growth, or
I
yeah, I
think
mean, I can imagine there's some fears of doing this very life-changing thing within the container of a couple.
yeah, you could. Well, more from a generalistic point of view, and that, like Jeanine said, that not only goes for couples, but you understand when you go in because you want to change something, changing the relationship that you have with yourself will change everything around you.
Yeah.
So that's what I always say when people come to me for individual psychotherapy. Then I talk about the side effects of psychotherapy as well. And I think the most important side effect of individual psychotherapy is partner relationship issues. Because if you step in feeling really dependent on your partner and through the process you become more autonomous, then what you need from your partner changes. And if your partner doesn't change alongside,
Mhm.
you will get a conflict. And proving your autonomy can lead to more issues, more conflicts, more stress. And that can bring you in a strange paradoxical situation that you thought that therapy was helpful, but instead it made you more miserable because you have all of a sudden all these issues that weren't there before, so you thought.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So becoming more aware
Mhm.
mm, makes you wonder about what it is that you need
Mhm.
from another person.
I want to add something to that because I think this really speaks to you, Mikhail.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think
Uh,
a lot of women who go to therapy because they are more, maybe feel more welcome or more comfortable there, and then they are just lost with their partner, and their partner's lost with them.
Yeah. So we feel if one person does a psychedelic journey and the partner doesn't, that there's a lot of room for I don't know, I guess development, because uh, so much happens in or can happen in a psychedelic journey. it's almost like if one person starts to grow, like mentioned that before, the other one almost has to join at some point, because otherwise the paths will grow widely apart.
Yep. And I think in couples that are living abroad together, that already happens with just
Hmm.
the move. And then they start growing, maybe learning a new language, maybe their kids are learning a new language, maybe one's taken a new job and another one's a stay-at-home parent suddenly, and that's never happened before. It's just a massive explosion of your dynamics already,
Hmm.
and there's not a language around it, which I think is super interesting to consider, but also to maybe consider psychedelics as a way of acknowledging and maybe moving through that with more
Hmm.
grace.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so and yes, I think every woman who's been through therapy and is married can relate, or man if they're the ones doing the therapy. But in my circles, it's been largely women who are doing this work. Um, okay, so what? So my couple. So a question I have is: a couple is nearing the ending of their relationship. Is psychedelics a good? Because that's a lot of times when you people go to therapy, to couples counseling, is when their relationship is kind of maybe over or has reached a plateau. Is that a good time, or is there any bad time to have a psychedelic journey together?
I think it's definitely a good time to have a psychedelic experience, preferably together, before they pull the plug, because it's in a way it's pretty easy to pull the plug. It's much more difficult to go deeper and look beyond than try to do this. So get beyond your own narrative and your own perspective and see if there is a bigger a bigger theme happening and repeating, because ultimately if you leave the relationship you take yourself with you. So if you didn't work through repeating patterns or certain things that keep coming in your past, it's bound to happen again.
It comes down to learning to recognize your projections. The moment that you project and you're not aware,
Which
you
is
make
basically all the time, right? Like most of the
what we
time.
do. That's what we do. We
Yep.
project and we project, and all of us do it. And I think it's all about growing awareness. The whole mm, well, journey, so to speak, that we are going through as individuals, but also to make it bigger, as mankind, is becoming aware of being aware.
Mm,
Because the moment that you do, you can distinguish between what you are projecting and what's truly there in front of you. And you can take responsibility for your wanting to make the other person responsible for the way that you feel.
mm,
And as long as you start doing this, you make someone else responsible about something that is innately yourself,
mm,
then you're giving away your own power. And as long as you do this, there is this need to be dependent,
mm,
because what the other person feel about you seems to be more important than what you allow yourself to be.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And I would just like to be clear, you guys' goal is never to make sure the couple stays together, just like regular couples therapists. But if they do part, it seems like even better to have gone through this together, because you're
yes.
always a part of each other's life if you've had a long-term relationship.
And it's also, I think, hopefully they will be able to separate in love and out of love.
Mm,
Mm. And tell me
Um,
about that difference. That sounds interesting.
because to separate in love is that you come to understand that we all are all, as people, manifestations of the same love. That's the deep connective bond that we all have. We are all, in that sense, the same. The same in what we need, the same. There's no difference between what I need deep down. It's all about the same thing. It's about being seen, about being heard, uh, being understood, to be appreciated, to be supported. It's all about the same things.
Yep.
Um, so that's the recognition. If you can recognize these same needs within your partner, even though it has served its purpose, and you can say, thank you for being in my life, but I will make a next step. Then
Yep.
you can separate in love.
Mhm.
And also because you allow yourself to make the next step, but also in allowing your partner or ex-partner to make the next step. And then you separate out of love.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
So
really beautiful. And I think it speaks to a more humane way of parting, perhaps.
Mhm.
Um, so I think we're talking a lot about the inner workings of the therapist, but what I've experienced is I don't need to know any of this to be affected by this. Like you and I, we've worked together in this way, but I've never heard you speak like this. So I just really want to make that clear to our listeners that you don't need to become a psychotherapist or a psychologist. You guys are really giving us a window into the inner workings of this, which I love. But when you're in it, it just seems like magic. like,
Mhm.
and so tell me a little bit what I mean from my own experience. I can say the shifts started when we started the work together, even before we had a session together. It felt like just the intention of working together began to shift things in a major way. And I think some people who work in this realm kind of describe that as like the things we can't know really, but part of the mystery. um, and so have you guys kind of, as scientists, as your first
Mhm.
love and study, how do you in yourself make room for that, or like have you just kind of watched it and lovingly, how do you approach that magic part? Or if you don't, if you just enjoy it, that's
Mhm.
okay too.
No, that's a really good question. I feel the moment someone decides to go this path, it already starts, even if the journey is months ahead. There is a seed, almost like a seed. Well, perhaps it's a mycelium related seed. I don't know. Mycelium is the name of the roots that are under the ground that are connecting the mushrooms and the truffles. But I feel once you've decided I am open for this potentially transformational approach, that's when awareness raises, and when the journey starts on different levels. Would you agree, Hans?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's all about allowing yourself to open up, because I think the magic happens when you can surrender uh, to whatever it is. Um, and that's the difficult part as well, because we we were born and raised in a world that's all about control.
Mhm.
And control is maybe the opposite to surrendering.
Yeah.
Um, and it comes forth from, I think, distrust. You can say, yeah, well, you don't want to be naive, so it's a good thing to control. Of course, it's not that black and white, but for most of us, it's trauma based. This sense of control is because there's this idea we have to do it ourselves, and hmm, for lots of people, they say, and I better do this alone because I don't really trust your motives to be part of my life. And those feelings, this blueprint is really deeply rooted and is transcends or and it precedes our knowing, our rational knowing.
Mhm.
So that's what I come across with so many of my clients that have had difficult starts in their lives with broken attachments, and that's always the fundament of distrust and
Yeah.
fear. So when people allow themselves to be open, then you need to be open to let the stuff out that's bothering you, the the, the residue of trauma, literally, the pain, the grief, the tears. It needs to come out. For it to come out, you need to be open. But when you're open, other stuff can come in, the stuff that you don't necessarily want, the stuff that you have the idea, well, I'm already full of stuff that I don't want. So when I open, more crap can come in. So I better not open. And the magic happens when you see that people are starting to open up, and when they can completely surrender in the experience itself, then yeah, they talk about profound stuff. But if you have still this need for being in control, it's going to be a battle from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I think I want to talk a little bit, we're wrapping up a little bit. Um, what do you think you want to say about what happens after? So, if a couple works with you or an individual, I think it's a similar process. They come to you, they do a series of sessions potentially, and then it could be that they say, "Oh, great, we feel fine," for a few weeks or a week or a month. But as you've told us, and I've heard you say before, if you don't work on it, deepening those things, it comes right back. And so describe the work after that. And I would say it's not just work, it's just also fun. It can be fun, it can be hard, it can be a lot of things. We say work, and I want people to realize it's just not a very good word to describe exactly what you're doing always. Because in my experience, it's been a lot of fun to process this with Doug. It's also been hard. It's been it's been confronting, but there's an element in there that's also just really satisfying. So, how would you describe that? The work you do with people after integrate, like you call it integration.
Yeah, but integration is the word we use, but it's really a continued development, because all of a sudden, usually in couples therapy, a couple comes and says, "Here's the problem," and then points to the person next to them, and then the other one says, "No, there's the problem, and I am also here." But 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 after a psychedelic journey, there's just so much more to talk about, because often it relates to values and not who put out the trash and who didn't, or who gets more me time and who doesn't. It's less trivial, much deeper, and thus you are able to move a couple uh, further in their development when you work with those values that often surface during and after a session. What would you say, Hans?
Yeah, I think, and like we mentioned before, integration is, well, only a word. It also needs to be implemented on a more bodily level.
Mm,
It has to come down to a new experience, not only a corrective thought pattern, because we know the power of thought is immense, but it doesn't reach all the layers that preceded our thinking. And when we're talking about our most early experiences, those were without words.
mhm,
So lots of the difficulties that you see in couples are really related to these early attachment styles.
mhm,
So you have to feel safe within your body as well. So the integration work for me doesn't go without the physical aspects of it. You can call it bonding, um, connecting to your own body, the breath work, the the role playing in the way that you can sort of feel the parts that you are playing. Um, it goes so much further than the mere rational understanding of it. So the integration, and that's where the fun comes in as well.
Yeah.
That you can,
It's everything. I just wanted to make sure we included fun because for me it's been everything. But what I would say is it has given us as a couple like a new realm to play in,
Mm,
emotionally, physically, everything. That after 20 years, I think most people think is not available. But I always believed it was. And so
mm,
for me, that's a really it's just really beautiful. I think that I mean we have trouble describing these things, but I think that for me is why this is on the forefront because I think we don't know where else to go sometimes when you're with someone a
mm,
long time,
mm,
and this gives you that new frontier or that new
mm,
hill to climb or that whatever you need metaphor with these joined values that are sometimes not explicit values. You have these secret promises with yourself that you don't bring out into the relationship. And this gives you an opportunity to reevaluate that in some ways.
mm,
So it's been extremely, I would encourage anyone who is a good fit to consider it. But also, like you said, it's a very more of an initiation, more of a something that you have to really be up for emotionally as well as if you're physically able. So I want to talk about a little bit, just really quickly. Um, what do you wish to see as far as legalization? The Netherlands is one of the most, but it doesn't allow everything, but it is one of the most liberal places to practice this kind of medicine. Um, what would you guys like to see if you had a Christmas list or a
mhm.
list of things you'd like to see?
We do, and Hans is working on it. We want to share?
Yes, please.
yeah, as you know, and that's I think all the effort that Rick Dublin from the MAPS organization, working I think from 1986 with such an effort to get MDMA FDA approved, Food and Drug Administration, to make it officially into a medicine. Um,
Because
hope,
medicine we understand. We don't
yeah,
understand the psychedelics, but we understand in the Western world medicine isn't needed.
correct. So, let's call it medicine because
Mhm.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
Um, and hopefully it will be approved in 24, in
Oh,
2024.
it's coming up, so it might be approved in the US in
It might be
2024.
approved in the US for the protocolized use in the treatment of people with post-traumatic stress disorders. But we already know it's got such a broad application. Especially, it's an enactogen. It's not a true psychedelic as such, in the sense on high dosages it can give you hallucinations as well and a sort of psychedelic experience. But in that sense, it's not a true psychedelic. It's more an enactogen, so it opens the heart and allows people to interact with one another. So it has a specific place within the therapeutic trajectory.
Mm.
And for me, it sounds like the perfect medicine to use within partner relationship therapeutical processes where you have both of the partners at the same time
Mhm.
as a therapist. Um, so MDMA is a really important one, and hopefully um, it's going to be worldwide acknowledged for the power it has in a positive way, thanks to again Rick Dublin. Another one, is ketamine, and ketamine is already officially a medicine being used in the treatment of therapy-resistant depressions. In higher dosages, it's a psychedelic as well,
Mm.
but not per se classic one, and the one that we are talking about, truffles, psilocybin, is a classic psychedelic, and it has a place for its own as well. I do believe the power is most of it in the inner journey, not necessarily within the context of a talking cure, of a talking based therapy, because it pulls you in.
Mm.
It confronts you with the stuff that you sometimes knowingly, but most times unknowingly, want to keep away from. So it's really powerful. Hmm. So they all have their own place, and hopefully, what we're witnessing now is that there is a sort of revolution going on, and I think in the Netherlands it will take still a number of years for it to be fully implemented. Not for the least because we don't have enough trained therapists to work with it in a responsible way. So we need to take it step by step.
Right. And it sounds like you guys are doing, well, you're on the forefront and doing everything possible to make all levels of that go, which I commend you for, congratulate you for, and I'm thankful for. So,
Hmm.
yeah. Um, is there anything else you guys want to say? I have one last question that has nothing to do with therapy. So, is there anything else we haven't covered that you wanted to?
No, there's so much to say, and we could talk about this for hours. But I
Yeah.
think hopefully your listeners are not going to be taken aback by the psychotherapeutic level of this conversation, because you're right. You don't have to be a therapist to do this at all.
No. And it really does seem like magic. Like I think that's the most astounding part of this is that it is so effortless if you do surrender. It's not effortless. There's just not a lot of words, but what it
Mm,
does seem, the word I keep coming back to is the magic which lives in all of us is brought out in new ways which are really thrilling,
Hmm.
and can be life affirming, can be life changing, all of the words that just aren't adequate enough. But with my last question, it's always very indulgent. Without considering other family members, reality in any way, if you had to pick one place to actually settle down for life, where would it be?
Oh, I know this. I would definitely choose Hawaii. My son lives there, and I went there for a visit, and I thought this ticks all the boxes. The nature, the people, the everything is growing there. So that's my choice. How about yours, Hans?
Well, I'm born and raised in Amsterdam, and that's for me what I've seen of the world still the most beautiful place to be in and to live in. And well, my loved ones all live here, so I don't see myself moving anywhere else than in the vicinity of my loved ones. So I think, and I'm quite happy living in Amsterdam, so I don't need to dream about other places where I would like to be.
Yeah.
So Amsterdam it will be.
House of Peregrine members are always country shopping, even if they live somewhere for the rest of their life. It's all about going where suits you best in the moment or the phase you're in. And so, thank you for sharing that. Thank you
Hmm.
for everything you're doing. Thank you for opening up and being part of my journey. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this with the rest of our community and the world. So, thanks for coming on, you
Hmm.
guys.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having us.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.